what's up, everybody? So good to be here with all of you today. Hi, girls. These are my little girls over there sitting on that side. So thrilled to be able to be on this campus, the Sunnyvale location. This place is near and dear to my heart. This is home campus for us. Been a part of even seeing this whole space here on this campus being transformed over the last few years. And I'm so glad to be able to share a word that I really believe God's put in my heart for all of you. You know, we've been in this journey together as a church over the last few weeks where we've been talking about the virtues, the values, the language that we believe shapes and embodies who we're called to become as a community of faith. And when it came the time to start thinking about what that would look like as we're shaping this language, I had some things that had already been stirring within me, and I can't wait to share some of these things with you today. Because I had the realization that it started for me all the way from when I was a kid. Now, anybody that has kids, you're aware that kids are constantly asking questions about every which things that you might not even have any answers to whatsoever. Well, in my house growing up, it was a little bit the other way around. Because I remember my dad at the dinner table, every single night, he had his question of the night to try and get us to think about something. And it was all kinds of questions, right? My dad, who was a mechanical engineer at a particle accelerator, he would ask us questions like, here's a plastic water bottle. How do you think this was manufactured and made? All right. Or we'd get ready to go on a trip somewhere, and he says, think about an airplane. How do you think an airplane wing causes it to lift off the ground? His answers always had to do something with pressure, and that was one of them. Or sometimes it'd get a little bit more spiritual, or he'd say, if God is outside of time and heaven is outside of time, does that mean we already exist there? Now, that's the kind of pondering you want to give a 7-year-old at the dinner table together. But I realized something a little bit later in life, the kind of virtue that our dad was trying to instill within us, this yearning, this searching, this seeking answers. And he was trying to put that in us, and it's become kind of a core value for me in my life actually today. And so when it came time for us to start working on some of the language for our church and define the series we are and write the language for our values, I'm not kidding. I actually came to our meeting. I had a full-page doc already written up for this one value that I want to share with you today. What if I told you that there was a virtue that if we were truly to fully embody it, I'm convinced would deepen our relationship with God, it would grow our connection with one another, it would disarm our prejudices, it would dissolve our anxieties, it would help grow our creativity and our innovation, it would unlock future opportunities, it would grow our wisdom and our knowledge, so much of these things. Would you want it? If one virtue can unlock all these things, is that something you would want? Let's take a look together at the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs was written or attributed to be written by King Solomon. If you don't know who King Solomon was, maybe you're familiar with King David, the guy who fought Goliath, David and Goliath. His son later became the king of Israel. And he wrote this book of wisdoms called Proverbs. And we're going to take a look at Proverbs chapter 2, starting in verse 6. You can read it or follow it along with me on the screens right here. It says, for the Lord grants wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He grants a treasure of common sense to the honest. He is a shield to those who walk with integrity. He guards the path of the just and protects those who are faithful to him. Then you will understand what is right, just, and fair, and you will find the right way to go. For wisdom will enter your hearts, knowledge will fill you with joy, and wise choices will watch over you. Understanding will keep you safe. Now, wisdom is something we all want and seek, right? Like, wisdom is the fruits that we're after, but it's not the virtue, the value that leads us to getting the wisdom. That's what we're trying to get at. But here, this is what the author of Proverbs is saying. He's saying wisdom gives us all these things. He says knowledge and understanding. Wisdom gives you common sense. Wisdom shields us from immorality. It shows us the right path to go forward. It fills us with joy, and it keeps us safe. Now, this is something we all desire. Now, for most of us, I think in the common wisdom of understanding what wisdom is, the way we would define it probably would just be defined as wisdom and understanding. If I can come to understand this thing, if I can come to the right knowledge and feed myself to understand these things, I will grow in my wisdom. But here he's talking about something a little bit deeper than that. We're talking about a kind of divine wisdom that leads to a life of purpose and meaning, a life of healthy relationships, right? Healthy relationships with ourselves as we get to know ourselves, healthy relationships with one another, and healthy relationship with God. So what is the virtue that leads us to this kind of wisdom? What is the one thing that leads us to that? We're going to go back to that passage in Proverbs one more time, but we're going to actually scroll back just a few verses, starting in verse 2. So Proverbs chapter 2, verse 2, he says this. He says, "Tune your ears to wisdom and concentrate on understanding. Cry out for insight and ask for understanding. Search for them as you would for silver and seek them like hidden treasures. And then you will understand what it means to fear the Lord and gain the knowledge of God." See, wisdom isn't something that lands in our lap by accident. It comes to those, he says here in Proverbs, to those who listen for it, for those who will ask for it, and those who search for it. And to me, there's one word that summarizes all of these things. There's one word that encompasses this kind of pursuit of divine wisdom that encompasses all of these three things. The key to unlocking divine wisdom is curiosity. Curiosity is what drives our desire within us to fill that hunger. It's a posture of humility. It's acknowledging that there's a gap within us that needs to be filled, and there's a desire and a hunger within us to fill it. That's what it means to have curiosity. I remember many years ago now, I met with a spiritual director for the first time. A spiritual director is it's not really a life coach, it's not really a therapist, it's not really a pastor, but it's a little bit of all of those things together. And in my very first meeting, he said something to me that stood out so much, and I think about this all the time. We'll put it on the screen right here. Take a look at this with me for a second. He said, "Tim, we don't grow from past experiences. We grow when we reflect on them." We've all met people, right, in our lives who've lived hard, long, difficult lives and yet seem to actually still lead a meaningless and unhealthy life. Having a tough life does not necessarily lead to wisdom, but reflecting on the reasons why these things are happening in our lives and gleaning the things that there is to glean from them, that's what leads to wisdom. That's why we as a church, we've been encompassing this value about curiosity, and we've been saying we are a people of curious minds. We eagerly seek to learn, to create, to innovate. Let me tell you, every single word here in that statement actually really matters. Every word has meaning to it. We say we are eager about it because there's a hunger within us to know that there is more. We say that we seek for it because we're active in our pursuit to fill that hunger. It's not something that we passively sit to hear and receive from. We're going after it. We learn because we know there's always something to grow. On this side of eternity, this journey never ends. We create because we get to embody the heart of God, who is the creator of the universe. And we innovate because we are a people that are called to shape the future. That's what it means to be a people of curious minds. So let's go back now. We're going to unpack this passage in Proverbs chapter 2. Let's go back and look again. What does it really mean? How do we find that kind of wisdom and engage our curiosity together? In verse 2, he says this: "Tune your ears to wisdom and concentrate on understanding." saying to have a curious mind means listening carefully. Now, anybody who has children, you know there's a big difference between hearing and listening, right? Hearing is involuntary. It's a passive thing. Whether I like it or not, I hear words and I hear sounds. But listening is something that actually requires me to engage my will. Listening is grabbing the words that I'm hearing, it's discerning through them, it's interpreting and gleaning from it. And in a day and age when there is so much that we're hearing, probably more than ever in human history are we hearing things today. When there's so much that we're hearing, it is so important to discern what we need to be listening to. And if we're after the kind of divine wisdom that we're reading about right here, we have to go to the divine source. If what we're after is the type of healthy relationships and life of meaning and purpose that God is calling us to, we have to go to the divine source. It's like if you've ever had one of those old radios where you had to turn the knob, right, to get to the right frequency. You have to adjust and find the right frequency to filter through the noise until you can hear the voice and the sounds clearly. And I think the same is true for us. In the midst of all the noise in our experiences in life, it is so important to tune out the noise so that we can hear the voice of God speaking to us today. See, God is speaking through his words right here. This is inspired by him. It's not a book that was written directly to you and me, but it was written for us. And it speaks and it reveals God's heart to you and me. God speaks through his Spirit. The Spirit of truth, his whisper, his power within us. God speaks through his people. We see it all over, throughout history, throughout this book, over and over again. God uses people to speak on his behalf, to be his mouthpieces and to be the carriers of his will. God is speaking. Are you listening to his voice? What can we all do together today to start reducing the noise? You know, one of the best practices from the last few years for me, something that I practice almost daily, is something called the examine. The examine is a daily reflection for about 4 to 5 questions that takes me about 10 to 20 minutes to ask God to show me the places and where he was present in my previous day. Where did I notice him? Where did I fall short? And invites me to look towards my next day. God, what are you doing moving forward? And just this simple act of reflection is allowing me to invite the presence of God and glean from his wisdom and the things that he wants to do, to reveal the awareness he wants me to have about myself and the awareness around where he's been present. Okay, in verse 3, cry out for insight and ask for understanding. So to have a curious mind means listening carefully, and it means asking earnestly. Anybody ever been lost on the road driving somewhere? Man, when you're lost, right, if you don't humble yourself to pull down your window and ask for help, likely you will remain lost. Pride keeps us wandering, but humility is the thing that gets us home. It takes us having the humility to ask the questions to find the heart of God in these things. I remember too many years ago now, I was a student at San Jose State University. Actually, I was a student at the same time as your campus pastor, Stephen Zier, on that same campus. I was a part of a college ministry there where every Friday morning, we would go on campus and we would have spiritual conversations with people, oftentimes through the lens of a spiritual survey, to ask students, how did you come to your beliefs, or what do you believe, and so on. And just a way to spark conversations. And we have conversations with all kinds of people of all backgrounds of faith, from devoted followers of Jesus to heathens like Pastor Stephen at that time. Things have come a long ways with him. But I remember being so shocked. I remember being so shocked in the beginning it was very awkward, but after a while I was so shocked to realize the vast majority of people had come to the conclusion of very hard-held beliefs with 1 ounce of reflection. Most people had actually not really spent the time to really think deeply about the hard questions of life, faith, and meaning. And if they had done it, most of them had done it in a vacuum by themselves. They studied a collection of books and made up their own thing. or they had done it in an echo chamber where everybody was already reverberating the same kinds of beliefs. And let me tell you, I found that to be just as true for people who said they were staunch atheists, and the same to be true with people who said they were devoted followers of Jesus. Most of them had not truly spent the time to ask the question and really wrestle with the things that matter most. See, one of my favorite things here at Echo is a group called Alpha. Alpha is an environment where every week we meet together and we address some of the biggest questions around life, faith, and meaning. And the richest conversations in Alpha come when there's disagreements. The richest conversations come when there are multiple points of views being represented and we can wrestle through them together. That's how we gain wisdom from it. If everybody agrees in an Alpha group, honestly, it's worthless. It's boring and there's no point in being here anymore. The richness comes when people come eager to seek answers and to learn more. C.S. Lewis, who was the author of the Chronicles of Narnia, he has this great quote relating to the Christian faith. And I talk about this whenever I'm in an Alpha group. I bring this up usually. He says this: if Christianity is false, it is of no importance. But if it's true, it's of infinite importance. The only thing it can't be is moderately important. So if the consequences of faith today for us have eternal consequences, we truly owe it to ourselves and everybody that we know around us to truly take the time to wrestle and to ask earnestly for these questions. It matters. So have you ever spent the time to truly ask for understanding? Not to just understand your own beliefs, but even to magnify the gaps in your understanding, to realize that you don't have the full picture. When's the last time you truly asked God to reveal himself to you, to impart his wisdom to you? All right, now we're going to go to verse 4. He says this: search them as you would silver. Seek them like hidden treasures. So, to have a curious mind means listening carefully, asking earnestly, and it means searching relentlessly. A few years ago, we took our kids on a little vacation to Placerville. I know it's not the typical vacation destination, but we went there because we had friends that lived out there, but it's also the epicenter of the 1840s gold rush, right? That started and eventually became what the San Francisco Bay Area exists for. Really was because of this huge migration of people that came here for the gold rush. And I was so struck being there by the amount of effort and sacrifice that went in for people to come here in the hopes of finding hidden treasures. I was doing some Googling this week, and I was reading that they had excavated about 1 million pounds of gold in the first 5 years of the gold rush, which seems pretty significant. 1 million pounds of gold in the first 5 years. And then I was wondering, okay, so how much dirt and rocks do they have to dig up in order to get that 1 million pounds of rock? There's actually not a lot of good data on this, but I did find something. And it said that there had been 37 million pounds of dirt dug up every single day in one of those locations where they were mining for gold across the whole state. So for 1 million pounds, they had to dig up 37 million pounds a day in one site. And these people left their whole lives behind just in the hopes of a few ounces that would change their lives. And here the author in Proverbs is saying, seek this kind of wisdom like hidden treasures. That's the kind of posture he's telling us to have. See, wisdom doesn't just land in our laps. It's something that has to be dug up. A few years ago, about 3 years ago, I went through a pretty serious health episode that left me bedridden for about 5 months and also in pretty serious pain during that time. And every day on my bed, I was staring at my dresser. We had a verse, it's still there, that was posted up from Psalms. And the verse says, "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him." Now, I had no problem being still at that point. In fact, it was mandatory. I had no choice. But waiting patiently before the Lord became kind of a challenge. After a couple months, honestly, I started to lose hope. And I even remember thinking, you know what? There are people right now that are praying for me who are so faithful, who are more spiritual than I am, and they're literally praying every day. If God's going to change anything about my circumstance today, he'll hear from them. Because honestly, I'm tired of asking at this point. And during that same period of time when I was wrestling through all this, I also remember reading this passage in John chapter 5. John chapter 5 tells this story of this man who had been lame and paralyzed for 38 years. Now puts my 5 months in perspective. 38 years. And this man was laying down by this place called the Pool of Bethesda. This was a pool that had been known for miraculous healing. That when the waters of the pool would start to bubble up, people would be brought into the pool, they would find miraculous healing. And so this man is there at the pool, and Jesus approaches him. And this is what Jesus said. He said, "Do you want to get well?" I automatically was reflecting like, yes, of course, yes, he wants to get well. What kind of question is this? Also, I thought you were God. You should know the answer to this. And then verse 7, the man says, "I can't, sir," the sick man said, "for I have no one to put me into the pool when the waters bubble up. Someone else always gets ahead of me." In verse 8, Jesus told him, "Stand up, pick up your mat, and walk." Now, this was a story that I've been familiar with. I've heard since I was a kid. But that day, there was something I noticed that I had never noticed before in that story. There was a question that Jesus asked the man, "Do you want to get healed?" But the man's answer was not an answer to the question that Jesus was asking. Jesus said, "Do you want to get healed?" And the man said, "I can't get healing the way I think I'm supposed to receive healing." And my paradigm started shifting in my prayers to God because I had stopped praying for healing, but at that moment I started asking God a different question. To ask him, "God, what are you doing? Like, what is the purpose behind all of these things that are happening to me? What is the thing that you are trying to show me about yourself or about myself? What are you trying to shape in me right now through this experience? What's the meaning behind the things that are happening to me?" Let me ask you, what's the question that you're asking God today? And maybe what's the question he's trying to reframe you towards? What's the thing, the environment that you are doing to actively pursue wisdom from? How persistent are you in your search for it? Are you looking for it like hidden treasures? See, this kind of curiosity, that's what leads us to ask questions, to listen carefully, to search relentlessly. That's what it means to be curious. We're all born with curiosity. It's innate within us. I see my kids asking questions day in and day out about things I can't even get the answers to, but there's a hunger within them to learn. And something along the ways over the course of life, these things get chipped away at us, and we start to lose it. C.S. Lewis said this other thing, another quote from him that I love. This is one of my favorite quotes from C.S. Lewis. He said, "When I was 10, I read fairy tales in secret, and I would have been ashamed if I had been found doing so. But now that I'm 50, I read them openly. When I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the desire to be very grown up." I want to reclaim that mindset, to put away the childish fear of being so very grown up. That's what I want. Remember when I said there was a virtue that could help us to deepen our relationship with God, to grow our connections with one another, to dissolve our prejudices, to disarm our anxieties, to grow our knowledge and understanding, to spark innovation and creativity, to help unlock future opportunities. Curiosity unlocks all of these things. A curious mindset helps us to achieve and get to these things. I want to unpack some of these with you specifically today. A curious mind helps us to grow our connection with others and dissolve our prejudices. I remember hearing a talk one day where a man was saying, relating to other people and people different than us, and he said, if I was them, I would be them. It's so simple. But all of us are a collection of experiences and relationships and upbringing and environments that make up who we are today. And if I shared those experiences, those relationships, those environments, I would be just as they are. If I had those experiences, those relationships, those environments, those upbringing, I would be making the same types of decisions that they made. I would have voted for the same person they voted for. I would have had the same unhealthy relationships. I would have made the same wrong turns in my life also. If I was them, I would also be them. I love the show Ted Lasso. When I had my free trial on my Apple TV membership, I watched the first couple seasons. And there's this great quote at the very end of the first season. Ted Lasso is this football coach, real football coach, who came from the United States as an American football coach and gets hired to teach football to coach football in the UK. And the whole time, he's being treated as a doofus who doesn't understand anything, and he kind of doesn't. But it all culminates to this one moment at the very end of that episode, the last episode of that season, where he's being challenged by the antagonist to a game of darts. They're doing a bet. It's like a bet all kind of moment. Everything hinges on this time. And this guy challenges him to a game of darts, fully anticipating he's going to destroy him. And Ted Lasso, he says this statement. I don't know if we have it on the screens right here, but he says this phrase where he talks about being curious, not judgmental. And he talks about how his whole life, it's not just there in the UK, his whole life he's been underestimated. People have looked down on him and have made judgments about him. And he had this realization. He said, these judgments that all these people had about me actually had nothing to do with me. They don't know me. How could they judge me if they don't know me? If only they had been a little bit more curious to find out who I really am, maybe they would have felt differently. And he was paralleling to this moment against this antagonist who had not been curious to know, hey, Ted, have you ever played darts? And he comes to reveal he's excellent at darts and then destroys and takes the game over at the end. Be curious, not judgmental. See, curiosity is acknowledging we don't have the full picture of one another, but it gives us the hunger to find out more. Curiosity helps me to increase my self-awareness and disarm my anxieties. See, curiosity helps me to know myself better, to know what my motivations are, to know where the things that have shaped me in my childhood and how they lead me to the decisions that I make today. It leads me to a deep study of myself. One of the most life-shaping books of the last few years for me has been one called Managing Leadership Anxiety by an author called Steve Cuss. And let me tell you, I never saw myself as an anxious person. But reading this made me realize how much of life has to do with how we relate our emotions with one another. And Steve Cuss in his book, he says something that's deeply profound. He talks about how the antithesis of anxiety is not peace, but it's curiosity. Because when we are curious about somebody else's emotions or their anxieties, it allows us to come to it with a better understanding, and it creates a barrier for us to prevent us from catching it and spreading it to others. A curious mind helps us to increase our knowledge and wisdom. We know this. We know that when we're curious, we seek to learn, to grow, to understand, but it also allows us to magnify the gap. The more I read this book and study it, the more I realize how much I am lacking in my understanding of it. A curious mind helps us to unlock future opportunities. Every innovation, all of human history, came from curious people. Curiosity is the little snowball that leads to the avalanches of all of human innovation. It leads us to creating the most incredible things in all of human existence, to embody the nature of our Creator by creating ourselves. You know, my title here at Echo is creative pastor. I actually don't think it's a very accurate title because I don't create very many things here at our church. I do help organize a lot of creative people in our church. But one of the things I love that our team is doing is writing songs for our community at this time and at this place. They're writing songs specifically for us to connect with the heart of God. We're embodying the nature of God so that we can connect with Him more deeply. And man, next week we're celebrating, this has been years in the works, but next week we're celebrating the final album release is coming out. We're having Counter Night at our Fremont campus. We're gonna worship together, and we get to celebrate this huge creative venture of what's come out of the people of this church, these songs that have been written for this time, this place, and our community. And lastly, a curious mind helps us to deepen our relationship with God. Curious mind is not afraid to wrestle with our doubts. It actually allows us to come face to face with them, to wrestle with them, but not to be ashamed of them. It yearns for me to have a hunger to understand more and to seek God in understanding more deeply. It bridges that gap between the understanding in my head and the experience with Him in my heart. Dallas Willard, a famous theologian, he said this: until our thoughts of God have found every visible thing and event glorious with His presence, the word of Jesus has not truly, fully seized us. So one thing we say often here at Echo, we say there's more of God for you. On this side of eternity, there is nothing that will fully encompass the eternal and endless nature of God. And whether this is your first time stepping into the doors of the church and you're exploring faith, or you've been a part of a faith community and following Jesus for decades, there's always more of God for you. Nothing will ever fully seize us with the fullness of who God is on this side of eternity. And if you ever hear somebody say that they have, please run away from them. That's what it means. Can you imagine with me what that would look like for us to embody this as a community of faith? To be a people of curious minds that eagerly seek to learn, to create, to innovate. That we would be people that listen carefully, that ask earnestly, that search relentlessly what kind of community we would shape. The future that we'd be able to build together. The kind of peace we would get to experience even in the midst of the greatest turmoils. The unifying power that would come from it. The depth of the faith that would be shaped within us. See, curiosity helps me to see myself with a more clearer picture. It allows me to see the great depths of my brokenness, my sin, and my shame with great clarity. But it also allows me to see and appreciate better the incredible grace that's been extended to me. We talk about this image of this great exchange. What a trade this is. My mistakes, my sin, my brokenness, the love and mercy of God. That's what Jesus did for us. A curious mind helps me to appreciate the depravity and the difference between those two things. That I wasn't deserving of God's grace, and yet He chose to sacrifice for me. That He was fully deserving to take my life, and yet He chose to show me mercy. In a moment, we're going to partake in communion together as a church. Communion is an act of remembrance. It's remembering that sacrifice that was paid for you and for me and what Jesus did. We get to partake in an act of remembering what He's done. And as I was reflecting this week and all the events in our world and what's been happening, the age-old question of how could it be? How could a God who's all-powerful and all good allow for all that is happening in our world today. Where is God in the midst of all of these things? This is a question that's been wrestled with for centuries, and honestly, most answers to that question leave us kind of wanting for more. And in the spirit of curiosity, I wonder if there's maybe another question that's worth asking that maybe not give us the full answer, but maybe helps us get a little bit further. In knowing that we live in a world where there are beauties, great things, and great pain and suffering simultaneously, is there evidence that there is a God among us who understands it? And to me, the answer to that is absolutely yes. Because in the Gospels represented is at the central core of this message is a God who came to be with us through the person of Jesus and who went on that cross to take on our shame, our sin, our depravity, and our brokenness. And crudely put, we must ask ourselves, what in the world is God doing sacrificed on the cross? What it reveals to me is that God didn't come to distance himself from human suffering, but through the person of Jesus, he came to be a part of it. And that's the gift that we have today, that we get to come before Jesus in faith. That as we take communion together, we get to remember this sacrifice, his body that was broken for you, his blood that was spilled to cover your shame. So as you take the elements and as we sing together, would you remember? Would you look to him with great curiosity to see the brokenness within you and the goodness of God laid before you? And if you're not yet a follower of Jesus, would you just observe in this moment? We don't want to put on you an action to partake in that has not yet become a conviction of your heart. And as you observe, we're also celebrating together all the life change that God has already done just in the last few weeks. Last week, we saw people give their lives to Jesus and go public with their faith through baptisms across all of our locations. You'll get to see images of that as we worship together. But would you invite God to reveal these things to you in your heart? What are the things that he's inviting you to today? Let's pray. Father, thank you. Thank you because you came to bring life. That we can know you deeply as we ask, as we listen, as we search for you. Thank you that you are a God who understands our pain, and you came to be among us in the midst of it. So God, would we come before you with humility and acknowledging the things that you desire for us, the things that you desire for us to lay back behind us, and the things that you're inviting us to step towards. We invite you in this space together today. In Jesus' name.